Hello everyone, Arun Vanagopal of WNYC here. It's my pleasure to introduce the Center for Traditional Music and Dances series, Beat of the Boroughs, NYC Online. This online series features over 50 of New York's leading traditional instrumentalists, dancers, singers, poets, and more. From Mongolia to Haiti, Colombia to the Gambia, among many others, they remind us how the strength of our country lies in its embrace of diversity and immigration. We want to celebrate these remarkable members of the New York community in these challenging times. So please enjoy these 50 programs, share them with your friends, and spread the word. Enjoy the show.
Okay, so we're here on the Lower East Side in the border of Chinatown at Kealakulayana Synagogue. Most people ask, what is a Greek-Jewish synagogue doing surrounded by stores and restaurants with Chinese lettering or Hispanic grocery stores? And so 100 years ago, back when the Lower East Side was the hub of Jewish immigrant life, this section of the neighborhood, specifically Broome Street, Allen Street, Orchard Street, had an influx of Jewish families from Greece and Turkey and the Balkans. And that started in the turn of the century, and over the 1910s, 1920s, eventually the families saved up enough money, specifically the families that came from the city of Ioannina in northwestern Greece, and they were clustered right here on Broome Street. And so by 1927, they saved up enough money to build this synagogue that we're in right now. And we've been here on the Lower East Side for almost 100 years since. We're still an active synagogue. We have unique traditions that go back over 2,000 years to Greece, different from the Ashkenazi Eastern European Jews and different from the Sephardic Spanish-speaking Jews. So we're really a minority within a minority, but we're really proud of our heritage and really proud to stay on the Lower East Side and keep our traditions and our culture alive here. Let's take a look through the synagogue. So everything you see here has been restored to almost as original as it was back when we opened in 1927. We're a New York City landmark. We had a restoration about 15 years ago on the exterior and the interior. So the setup of the synagogue, you see it's quite narrow. That's because we're kind of a tenement-style synagogue. The lots in this part of the city, of course, are very narrow, so they had to squeeze, what they could in the property they could afford. But most everything you see is original. The wood floor was actually original from 1927. It was covered in linoleum back in the 1960s. Then during the restoration, we picked up the linoleum and discovered the original floor and restored it. The ceiling is pressed metal or tin ceilings that were typical of tenements and buildings from the turn of the 20th century. And we actually found the original company that made the metal ceilings back then, and they restored it and replaced it with the same exact design. The benches were handmade by the congregants back in the 1920s. And almost everything else you see is the way it was, the way our community prayed almost 100 years ago. And so during the services on Saturday mornings and on Jewish holidays, the men sit downstairs and the women sit upstairs. But we also have a museum that tells the history of our community and the history of Greek Jewry that goes back over 2,000 years. And that's located upstairs, which we'll take a look at in a little bit. So we're proud to tell our story. And like I said, we're really excited to share it with everybody at our Greek Jewish Festival. So let's go this way. So during the services, this is called the Bema, which is where the main service is led. And so in the front is the ark where we keep the Sefer Torahs, the Torah scrolls, and we bring it from there up to here in the middle. Most Sephardic synagogues from Spain and from the Middle East, they have the Bema in the middle. Ashkenazi synagogues, they have it in the front where they lead the services. So this is a little bit more of a Sephardic style, but because it was such a narrow building, they had to accommodate and adapt a little bit. But another thing that's unique to our community is that the benches face each other. It's not like pews that all face forward. So it's really about congregants being together, facing one another. It's not about watching a service. It's about being interactive and participating throughout the whole time. And we also have really unique liturgy and songs that we sing on the Jewish holidays that are specific to the town of Ioannina. And some of them originally were sung in Greek, or what was known as Judeo-Greek, which is a unique dialect of the Jews from Ioannina. And that's one of the unique customs here. And of course the music, which we have on the festival and other communal celebrations. So most people don't know that Jews have been in Greece for over 2,300 years. Most people, when they think of the Lower East Side or they think of Jews in America, they think of Ashkenazi Eastern European Jews, so pastrami, pickles, Eastern European cuisine. Fiddler on the Roof, which is great, but most people don't know of the non-Ashkenazi Jewish communities around the world. The other big subset of that is Sephardic Jews that were originally in Spain and Portugal after 1492 and the expulsion from Spain, the Spanish Inquisition. Those Jews fled to what is now the Balkans, the Mediterranean, Greece, and Turkey, and the Middle East. But when those Spanish-speaking Jews left Iberia, they discovered and were landing in places that already had Jewish communities. So in Greece, there was an existing indigenous Jewish community called Romaniotes, because they go back over 2,300 years to the time of Alexander the Great, or the Eastern Roman Empire, which is where the name Romaniote comes from. And they were in certain cities in Ioannina and Thessaloniki. They were actually in Istanbul. But most of the cities that the Sephardic Jews arrived in, they kind of took over and their traditions dominated. But certain cities like Ioannina and Arta and Preveza in Greece retained their unique local customs and traditions. And our community traces from the city of Ioannina, so we're proud to keep that subset, that tradition, for over 2,000 years alive here today. And we're actually the only Romaniote synagogue in the Western Hemisphere. So let's go upstairs to the museum. So like I mentioned, there used to be, of course, hundreds of thousands of Jews on the Lower East Side back in the turn of the century, and now we're only one of a handful of active synagogues that are left in this neighborhood that go back over 100 years, but we're the only non-Ashkenazi synagogue left in the neighborhood as well. And one thing we'd like to point out is that in this historic map of New York City from the 1930s, you could see almost every single block had its own synagogue, because families and communities that came from different towns throughout Europe wanted to keep their own unique traditions and customs, so they established small synagogues throughout the neighborhood. But with the change in the neighborhood, economic opportunity, children moving to better neighborhoods and more space from the cramped tenements after the World War II, eventually those all closed and different immigrant groups replaced them. But we're proud to tell that unique immigrant story from a Jewish perspective here on the Lower East Side today. So here we are in the women's section during services, but also, like I said, in our museum. So about 20 years ago, we created a museum in our synagogue to tell the story of our community and the Romaniote Jews from Ioannina. And so we have artifacts that families have donated over the decades. We have rare handwritten books of prayers and liturgical songs that they brought from Greece that go back centuries. We have elements that show the industry and the textile businesses that they became involved when they first arrived here, and a lot more stuff, so come take a look. This is our newest exhibit. This is a collection of rare prayer books and liturgical songs that were brought from Greece. Some of them are in Hebrew, but most uniquely, some of them are written in Judeo-Greek. So you can see them, they're actually written in Hebrew characters. So think Yiddish to Ashkenazi Jews, or Ladino to Sephardic Jews. Judeo-Greek was the language for the Romaniote Jews. So on the walls on the right and the blue boards, that's actually an exhibit that we've had for the past few years about the world they left behind when our ancestors first came here 100 years ago, and then the world that they arrived in here on the Lower East Side at the turn of the century. So it traces the history going back millennia in Greece, to the Ottoman Empire, to the modern Greek state, to the Lower East Side in the 19-teens and 20s as the hub of immigrant life, and then fast forward and we're here today. So come this way. We love to show this because this is a trunk that was brought from Greece, from the Negrin family in 1955 actually, and basically imagine bringing your entire life in a trunk on a ship like you see in the movies. And so this is what some of our community members brought with them, and with not only the physical items but also the heritage, the identity, and the communal ties that they grew up with were brought over as well. And then one of the unique traditions of the Jews from Ioannina, the Romaniote Jews, is called an aleph. And so an aleph is basically an amulet or a birth certificate for baby boys that was created to protect them for the first 40 days after they were born. And so some people usually think that it's a ketubah or a wedding contract, but it contains elements of Kabbalah, prayers, names of angels, Jewish mysticism, and it's basically hung above the crib of the baby, and it was thought to protect them. And this was a tradition that they brought over from Greece to here to New York. And we actually have the largest collection of olives around the world here in our synagogue and museum, from families that have donated it generations later. Unfortunately, the tradition kind of ended after World War II, but recently we're really excited. We restarted it, and we're actually producing new olives for baby boys and baby girls for anyone who wants to restart that tradition who has Romaniot or just Jewish heritage. And it's a great souvenir, a kind of birth certificate for your family. So these were originally made by rabbis and lay leaders of the community. They were all hand inscribed and illuminated with watercolors. But because obviously it was a unique art and craft, unfortunately it wasn't carried forward in the past decades. But we actually connected with a rabbi from Florence, Italy, who's a master scribe and artist, and he reproduced an original style olive for us that we now issue reproductions of and inscribe the names of the new babies and the parents. So it's really a unique item to carry forward for our families. So, of course, there's a rich history of Jews in Greece going back for millennia, but unfortunately part of our communal story is the devastation that happened during the Holocaust. So Greece has the unfortunate distinction of having lost the highest percentage of Jews of any country in Europe during the Holocaust. 87% of the Jews of Greece died in the Holocaust. So, our community was founded here in the 19-teens and 20s, but of course there were still thousands of Jews that stayed in Greece, and unfortunately, that when the Germans occupied Greece, they went to every little town, every city, every island to round up Jews. We actually have community members who survived the Holocaust who came here after the war in the 1950s, and they tell their story in our museum, and they've documented their experiences. There are a number of stories about, tragedy and Jews being captured and sent to Auschwitz, but there's also a number of stories of righteous Gentiles, righteous Greek Christians who helped save Jewish families, including many members of our communities that were in hiding during the war and survived and are still here today with their children and grandchildren, still part of our community. So, some people ask, why did Jews leave Greece in the early 20th century? There was the Balkan Wars, there was the decline of the Ottoman Empire, so there was a lot of changes going on in society, but ultimately most of our families came here for economic opportunity. Fortunately, most of their experience in Greece, our Jewish community, was peaceful. We were tolerated under the Ottoman Empire, and especially the Romaniot Greek-speaking Jews had good relations for the most part with their Greek Christian neighbors. So it wasn't the same experience as Ashkenazi Eastern European Jews who suffered significant persecution and pogroms in the 1800s. Our community really came here for economic opportunity in the turn of the century, and they not only came to New York and the United States, but they also went to Israel and other parts of Europe for a new life. So you can see here an original wedding gown that was worn from the Gani family from the city of Larissa in Greece from the 1800s that was donated from that family to our museum. Here also is another wedding dress that was donated from the Negrin family that was brought from Yanina, and it dates back to 1890. So you can see, of course, the Ottoman and regional influences in the dress before modern Greece and before they came to the United States. One of the most popular holidays for all Jews is called Purim, which is celebrated in the spring. It was celebrated last month in March. And it's the celebration of the redemption and the saving of the Jews under the Persian Empire 2,000 years ago, told in the Scroll of Esther, the Megillat Esther. And one of the customs of the Jews of Yanina was to actually give a Megillah or make one for a family, especially after they got married. So we have a collection of unique handwritten scrolls of Esther that were brought in from Greece. You can see them here, especially some unique silver expert filigree based on the artisans from Yanina. And one of the customs of that holiday is to dress up in costumes because it's a celebratory event, and the story of the Scroll of Esther is usually played out almost like a comedy in communities throughout the world. And you can see in these displays over here a little bit more about the older history of the Jews of Greece. You can see under the Ottoman Empire, the outfits were more Turkish influenced with the fezzes and with the robes. And then you can see in this photo here from the Negrin family, the transition at the turn of the century from more Ottoman era outfits and mindsets to more modern European mindset based on the older generation's outfits and the younger generation's more Western or French style clothing. So most people ask, what's different about Romaniot Jews or Greek Jews compared to other Jewish traditions? And one thing for sure is our cuisine. So our communities lived in what's the Mediterranean area for centuries, for millennia, and we still stay true to our Jewish traditions and Jewish law and practicing kashrut, keeping kosher. But we also integrated the cuisines and the cultures around us as much as we could. So our Greek Jewish traditions include tons of delicious foods on the holidays. We have the holiday of Passover coming up, where we make tons of different amazing dishes, including these leek patties called prasa keftedes or keftikas de prasa. We make lamb in honor of Passover. We make, some people call it pastel or mina, which is like a meat and ground onions and dill and potato pie. Think of shepherd's pie. Or spinach pie with spinach and feta cheese and matzah and egg mixed in. But throughout the year we have tons of other amazing foods like borekas, which are like empanadas, very common in Israel today and throughout the Balkan region. Basically, like an empanada, it's dough turned over filled with spinach and cheese, or different types of cheeses, or eggplant, or potato, or other vegetables, or sometimes ground beef. So all of it is amazing, and we'd like to still continue our culinary traditions here. We've had cooking classes, members of our community are professional chefs, and so at our Greek Jewish festival, we actually celebrate that as well, and we share all our amazing traditional foods that day too. So we've been here on the Lower East Side on Broome Street for almost 100 years, and most people ask, how did we survive? How are we still here when the entire neighborhood changed around us? And it's really because of a few dedicated individuals, specifically one person named Hai Jani. He passed away in 2006, but he was the president and the spiritual leader here for over 50 years. He grew up in the community. His parents came here from Yanina and knew the traditions and volunteered for 50 years, keeping the community alive, the synagogue building alive. And so it's because of him that our synagogue survived some of the more difficult decades in the 1970s, the 1980s, the crime on the Lower East Side. Most people after World War II, like I mentioned, and subsequent generations, they wanted to leave the cramped tenements of this neighborhood. They wanted to move to Brooklyn or Long Island or to the suburbs to get more space, to have the American dream. But a few families stayed here and kept the community alive. And today we're really interested in reaching out to the next generation of people with Greek Jewish heritage, both Romaniot and Sephardic. We started a Greek Jewish Young Professionals Network about 5 years ago, getting really younger generations involved. We have different events, like I mentioned, cooking classes. We have Shabbat dinners. We have other cultural programs. We have our Greek Jewish Festival. But really we've become a cultural center for anyone with Romaniot or Greek Jewish heritage. And we're proud to be, like I said, one of the few remaining synagogues on the Lower East Side. And so today we have a core group of board members. We're mostly volunteer here, but it's really a labor of love, and it's because of people that came before us that built this institution, that built our community, that we've been able to continue here today. My father grew up here on the Lower East Side. His parents, my grandfather was born in Greece and came here in 1920. My father's mother is actually, her family is from the city of Izmir in Turkey. My family is actually part Sephardic, so not Romaniot, but very closely related. My mom's side is Ashkenazi. But my father grew up here on the Lower East Side and then raised me and my brother here in this community. I had my bar mitzvah here. My brother had his brit milah and his bar mitzvah here. So since childhood, we've been part of this community. After Hai Jani passed away, the past leader of our synagogue, my father actually became the president. And so he's been president for about 15, 16 years now. And my brother and I and our family got more involved. We volunteered. I actually joined the board of directors here. And I actually came up with my family the concept of the Greek Jewish Festival 8 years ago. And so that's been a really big family effort. And of course we have tons of community volunteers that help make it all happen, sponsors, community organizations that support us. But really it's a team effort. And I am really proud of my heritage and want to make sure that we keep it alive and grow our community and share the amazing traditions that we have. So one of the things that we're proud to offer in our museum is actually the largest collection of books about the Jews of Greece for sale in English in the United States. So if you're ever interested in learning more, come visit us, but also reach out to us. We have tons of resources on our website, but also books and gifts and literature and music available if you want to dive deeper into the history of the Romaniot Jews and the entire Greek Jewish history. Yeah, sure. So this book, Greece, A Jewish History, is an amazing overview of the Jews living in Greece for over 2,000 years. It's written by our good friend, Professor Catherine Fleming, and it's a great overview if you want just a primer in the presence of Jews in Greece. And this book was actually written by a rabbi from the city of Thessaloniki before World War II, but it was translated about 20 years ago, and it documents the unique Sephardic customs and traditions of the Jews from the city of Salonika who spoke Ladino. And it's a really amazing documentation of a community that was almost completely destroyed in the Holocaust. Back at the turn of the century, there were hundreds of synagogues here on the Lower East Side, but there were actually a number of other Sephardic synagogues in the local few blocks around our synagogue today. They were in mostly rented spaces, storefronts, and one of them was from the city of Salonika that I mentioned, and they spoke Ladino, and so eventually those synagogues closed after World War II. Most of their communal members moved to the outer boroughs or the suburbs, and so this is actually a section of a mural from a wall that was in that synagogue around the corner from our location that was saved and donated to our synagogue as not only a remembrance but documentation of the presence of Sephardic and other Jews from Greece and the Balkans in this neighborhood. Okay, so right here when you come into the entrance of our synagogue, you'll see these marble plaques that date back to when the building was built in 1927, and you can imagine at that time immigrant families of 6, 7, 8 people. They were working class, they had to save up money just to survive and make it in America. But, you know, some dedicated families were very generous and they donated money to help build this building. And for $100, you actually got your name in stone, in perpetuity, on our marble plaques here in the synagogue. So we honor them. And today you can imagine how much it costs to get your name in a plaque in any new community institution. Sure. So, I mean, like most communities, our whole synagogue, our community was really disrupted during COVID. We have services normally every Saturday morning and all Jewish holidays, and we have a museum, of course, on Sundays that's open to the public. But all of that was put on pause back in 2020, and slowly we restarted services on Shabbat and on holidays. Thankfully, most of our community made it through, and we're still here. We've resumed regular services, resumed museum tours. But it was a big disruption because people lost those personal connections, those personal interactions on holidays, communal celebrations. And so we couldn't do our festival, of course, in 2020. Back in 2021, we had a smaller version. We called it a block party. But we still had our beloved music and a limited selection of our traditional foods. But really now in 2022, we're really thankful to be able to come back together again as a full community, to have this big reunion once again in our streets, right below the windows where our grandparents and beyond our ancestors lived when they first arrived here on the Lower East Side. We dance in the streets where our community initially landed when they came here to the United States. And everybody is welcome, and as long as, God willing, everything stays safe, we hope you can join us because it's really a lot of fun. It's going to be our full festival just like it was before COVID. And we're excited to bring everyone together and share even new musicians and new offerings this year that we never had before. So growing up, my family would take me to traditional Greek church festivals throughout the New York City region, and we loved Greek music. Everyone in our community learned Greek dancing. The older generations, there used to be a community organization called the Pashas that would have picnics and weekend getaways in the Catskills, and they would bring a Greek band to dance every weekend. But we never really had a formal festival of our own here at the synagogue. So back in 2015, I said to my father, who's the president, and to the other board members of the synagogue, I said, if they can do it, why can't we do it? And so thankfully, people had faith that we could make it happen. We got some people to make donations to sponsor the first festival. And ever since then, our Greek Jewish Festival has been an annual tradition. Like I said, it's modeled after the Greek church festivals here in New York City. But of course, it has our unique traditions, music, food, unique community activities, and kids' educational activities. But since then, it's really become a reunion for our entire community and extended families. We have people from the local neighborhood. We have Chinese people who don't speak any English dancing next to older Greek Jewish grandmothers, as well as anybody else who's not Jewish or not Greek. They're all welcome, and it's always a lot of fun. And it's grown from the first year in 2015, we had about 1,000 or 2,000 people. And then back in 2019, we had estimated over 10,000 people come throughout the day. And so this year, 2022, we're back in full force. We're really excited. It's a really packed program of music and dance performances and food and all different types of activities. It's on May 15th from 12 to 6 p.m. right here in front of our synagogue on Broome Street between Allen and Eldridge Street on the Lower East Side. And so we have musicians that are singing Ladino from the Sephardic communities of Greece and Turkey and the Balkans. We have a traditional Greek dance troupe, the Greek American Folklore Society, that's going to highlight different dance steps and different costumes from regions throughout the Mediterranean and Greece. We have our native son. His name is Avram Pengas. He's an expert musician, a virtuoso in guitar and bouzouki, in oud, and he knows a whole variety of Greek and Turkish and Mediterranean and Israeli music. He was born in Greece to a Romaniot family, grew up in Israel, and now lives here in the United States, and he's really our go-to musician for all our community events, and he always has an amazing group, the Noga group, and they get everybody up dancing in the circle. It's irresistible. You have to come see them. Then after him, we have another dance performance from amazing dancer Layla Isis. That's going to be at 3 p.m. Definitely check her out. Afterwards, we have music from Scott Wilson, who features not only Greek, but Turkish and Mediterranean and Balkan melodies and rhythms. And then we have an amazing group called Pontic Firebird with the musician Adam Good and Beth Bahia Cohen and a few others that really play the rhythms of a specific Pontic region of the Mediterranean. So each hour you're going to get a different flavor of Greece, of the Mediterranean, of Greek Jewish traditions, and you definitely don't want to miss it. We also offer a huge menu of traditional foods that day. So we have borekas, we have spinach and cheese, and feta, and Greek salads. We have potato borekas. We have what are called kuluria or biscochos, which are round cookies with sesame seeds. We have baklava, watermelon with feta, which is an amazing, refreshing salad in the warm sun. Tons of other things, mezes, appetizers with tzatziki and hummus and other things. I don't want to tell you everything. You have to come. Some of it is going to be a surprise. So the food, the music, the dancing. We have tons of vendors that are selling unique jewelry, Greek olive oil that's from a specific family's olive oil farm in Greece. We have a business that sells mountain tea from Greece that's, I think, will heal many of your ailments if you want to check that out. We have people who sell unique jewelry and handicrafts. We also have kids activities, so you can actually make your own aleph, that unique Romaniot birth amulet that I mentioned. We have a replica that children can make for themselves. We have other kids activities. We have basically an activity to teach people Ladino. So if you have any Sephardic background, you can learn a little bit of Judeo-Spanish, also known as Ladino, at our festival. And we have a bunch of other local community groups from throughout the Lower East Side and the New York City area. So don't miss it. It's from 12 to 6, but we pack it in. It's on our block in front of our synagogue, and it's really a lot of fun and a unique New York City experience.